Welcome to the 19th episode of the Maritime Medical Marijuana Show. Today's episode is the marijuana legalization debate that took place today, the 26th of March, at St. Mary's University, as put on by the political science department there. We had Nova Scotia's chief medical, what's-his-name guy, Dr. Strang. We had the superintendent from the Halifax Police Department. We also had Chris Enns from the Halifax Compassion Club and one of the lawyers from the Dalhousie Legal Aid Society. And we had a very interesting debate about the legalization of marijuana. It's about an hour and a half long. I suggest you spark up a joint, pack a bowl, get prepared, sit back, relax, and enjoy it, and have yourselves a great evening. Peace, love, and hippie shit. Bless you all.
It's our second big panel that we've thrown thus far this year. And tonight it's going to be based on the legalization debate, legalization of marijuana, that is. So on behalf of St. Mary's Political Science Society, I'd like to thank you all for coming tonight. And just to recap, for those of you who don't know, Political Science Society, it's a society basically dedicated to bringing hot topics of today to the forefront, just forefront discussion among the student body, more or less. And whatever the topic, whether it's controversial or conscientious, our fundamental mandate is that you, our fellow members of the academia community, be informed when it comes to these topics. So this notion alone conveniently brings us to the marijuana debate, and how it is currently being dealt with legally, medicinally, and economically. And having said that, it brings me great pleasure in introducing Halifax Regional Police Superintendent Don McLean, on his BlackBerry there. Nova Scotia's Chief Public Health Officer, this is Dr. Robert Strang, fashionably late. We have Nova Scotia Legal Aid Representative Cameron McKean on the end. And this is Chris Enns in the middle there, Vice President of the Halifax Compassion Club. I'm now just going to hand the podium off to Luke Donovan, and he's just going to further discuss tonight's panel.
So I thought I'd come in. Yeah, can I speak loud enough? Can you hear me in the background? I think, yeah, people usually say it's too loud. So I thought I'd just give a little bit of a little speech, just kind of warm things up. You know, tonight is an academic environment, and you know we want to kind of address this issue responsibly and with all the powers and education that we have at our disposal. So I'll just start off saying, you know, hello, Canadian politicians and international politicians. And I'm going to say the word politicians because, you know, we all make choices, you know, and decisions in our everyday life that affect, you know, the public policy of the nation and to a greater extent, public policy of the world. You know, tonight we have a topic that is underestimated, is often trivialized, but this is simply because we ask the question, how does legalization affect ourselves as individuals and not others as nations, you know, or others, you know, as our domestic or international, what have you. Look at one another. I see students, learners, representing various nations and heritages across the world that interconnect and affect one another. We are in Canada. Although being Canadian had more brand power in the 2000s, we should rightfully be proud that we are still a designated trendsetter, and a positive one at that, for world democratic policy. So when I asked Dr. Pessoa, a member of the political science community here at St. Mary's, you know, I'm interested in the geopolitics of the marijuana debate, and if Latin America, specifically Mexico and Colombia, will legalize cannabis in face of the rising violence. And he gave me a stern look, and he replied, you know, if BC, Quebec, and Nova Scotia aren't willing to do it, you know, as liberal, you know, establishment, you know, why do you think anybody else is going to do it? So, being Canadians, but more than that, you know, being students, learners, choosers, decision makers, we have a reputation of freedom of thought and of objectivity. The smoke of the 60s and 70s has cleared, but clearly we're still talking about the marijuana debate. Colorado and Seattle have just passed legislation, state legislation. And through that, we're seeing that Canada is starting to become defined differently. If you haven't noticed so, international actors and international can see that Canada is being defined differently. If Canada is to get back in its mode of success of its past international affairs and to renew domestic happiness. I think that it's important that we find this, we start, identifying these key policy areas of prohibited drugs and address it. And so for tonight, what key elements of our dialogue should we focus on? I'm going to give you 3. First is legally speaking. Cannabis is ultimately an inhibitory substance that has become increasingly potent since the 1960s. Consequently, the debate for the argument is not as it was as before. So we must take that into consideration. At the same time, there are disconcerting stories of juveniles that end up in prison for minor quantities as much as you can hold in a hand. No legal system is perfect, but that is not an excuse for complacency with the status quo and a disregard for progress. There are examples of successful drug policies around the world. Good choices and decisions were necessary for those to come into existence. Mind you, the ethics of defining good and bad and agreeing on it, not to mention forming a policy around it, is very difficult. It's strenuous and it's still experimental. I bid you encouragement to not shy away from the legal aspects of this debate. Next, economically speaking, cannabis can help contribute to Revenue Canada. To say the least, the taxes applied to similar prohibited substances are an indication of the cash that cannabis could bring under federal and provincial jurisdiction. Given Canada's large consumer base of the plant and what we know from organized crime, the profits are enormous. Healthcare is a good place for that money. On the other hand, the criminalization of cannabis offers other economic economic areas, such as the hiring of law enforcement and the training and the helicopters, everything that goes about it. There's economic value in 2 sides here, and we have to start asking, what are the larger implications of the economics, that we currently have on the marijuana policy, and what it can be if we choose to progress. We'd like to talk about economics lately since 2008. Expand on this on the marijuana debate if it feels that it concerns you. Third area is medicinally speaking. The jury is still out, but it is only a matter of time. It'll take time and more research comes to be. The study of medicine and marijuana is still relatively recent, but given the beneficial testimonies, conditions such as multiple sclerosis, glaucoma, cerebral palsy, epilepsy, spinal cord injury, just to name a few, they all have, tried and tested remedies that say, that marijuana works. So for all sufferers who find relief in the marijuana plant, we should take this into consideration. The pharmacology cannot reproduce the same medicinal effects of marijuana and manage the side effects. At the same time, we cannot forget the impact that that carcinogenics and smoke has on our lungs. The campaigns and arguments to eradicate smoking, tobacco, although unpleasant for both sides, is of particular importance on this debate. So we should should be conscious. And last, I was going to finish off on a lighter note. I kind of drilled you a little bit, just because I would really like that we exert a good analysis of this debate, and we have the opportunity tonight. But lastly speaking, culturally speaking, 1 of every 3 Canadians have tried, according to statistics, have tried cannabis in their lifetime. I can only conclude from that fact that the majority of Canadians are fairly familiar with this substance. I could go on, say Trailer Park Boys and the British Columbia bud scene, but the point is that it's just a part of life in Canada. So I return to my plea for you to be Canadian politicians and international politicians. You are in a good place for the debate tonight. I bestow upon you the responsibility of maintaining an integral academic approach to tonight's topic. In order for all of you to change Canada, to change the world. Thank you very much.
Hi, so the panel will proceed as follows. So first we'll have Dr. Robert Strang, then we'll ask Mr. John McLean, Mr. Chris Enns, and finally Mr. Cameron McNeil. Followed will be a brief question period. We ask that everyone remain respectful of all the opinions expressed here today, and we encourage everyone to ask a question at the end of the debate. Thank you. So Mr. Robert Strang, we ask that you please come forward and talk about your opinions on the legalization of cannabis. Thank you.
So thanks for the opportunity and good afternoon, everybody. I apologize for being late. Obviously held everything up. There was some mix up in the time that I had in my schedule, so I do apologize for that. So legalization of marijuana. Where do I start? From a public health perspective, I think we have to first and foremost, whether I'm a public health physician or a clinical physician, we all agree to a Hippocratic oath. The first premise of that is first do no harm. The second thing that I learned in my public health training is that, and I try to practice this as best I can within a government setting, is that decisions should be informed by the best evidence possible. So on the first one, first do no harm, I don't think there's any disagreement that our current approach around illegal drugs or illicit drugs does a huge amount of harm to individuals, to us collectively, from a health, social, and even economic perspective in terms of opportunities cost, in terms of money that we spend in the criminal justice system that we could spend elsewhere if we had a different approach potentially. So we need to think about things differently, and I think globally that's certainly awakening awareness that the current ideologically driven approach around illegal drugs from a purely and only from a criminal justice perspective is a failed experiment. If our overall objective around psychoactive substances, both legal, i.e. alcohol and tobacco, and illegal, and that's the full range of drugs from marijuana to more serious drugs, cocaine, opioids, etc. If our overarching premise is to actually decrease or minimize the use and minimize the harms, then we need to look at what actually gets us as close as possible to that goal. I'm not naive. All societies have and will into the future use some kind of psychoactive substance or substances for various purposes. But if we really say all of those come with harms and we want to minimize use and minimize harms, then I think the evidence in literature is very clear that we have a U-shaped curve. So on the one hand, if you have substances which are totally open, that are legal but completely unrestricted, so it's a completely free market system, the only imperative that's going to drive the production, sale, and distribution of those drugs is making money. And make no mistake, you will have huge amount of harms. If, on the other hand, you have a pure black market system, i.e. illegal, you will have the same imperative. Make money at whatever the cost, because that's the only overarching principle that on the production, distribution, and use and sale of drugs. And the literature is very clear that somewhere in the middle in this U-shaped curve is some type of government oversight and regulation and perhaps direct involvement in the production, sale, and distribution of a psychoactive substance. What that actual level of government oversight is has to be done very thoughtfully and is going to be different for different classes of drugs. So the type of government oversight and what you put in place for the sale and distribution and perhaps even the production of opioids and heroin is going to be different from a drug which is less harmful, such as marijuana. I say less harmful. Marijuana, make no mistake, produces harms individually and collectively. There's no psychoactive substance which is not safe or doesn't produce some kind of harm. So in the middle of that, we need to figure out, so each drug, so we need to work our way thoughtfully through that. Because what we don't want to do in this as we move perhaps towards loosening the legal restrictions on marijuana, we clearly do not want to recreate the mistakes we have made with tobacco and alcohol, which are both legal substances, but which have mostly left now to global corporations, which do huge amounts of damage here in Canada. And we have a fair level of government oversight. Now we'll argue we don't have enough government oversight, and we could decrease the harms and further decrease the use by further government regulation and oversight. But if you look globally in what the tobacco industry has done and the global corporate alcohol industry is doing in third world countries where there's much less government oversight, we now have an exploding epidemic of lung cancer and other diseases in the third world, and huge amounts of harm created by greatly unregulated tobacco and alcohol industries in the third world. So clearly we don't want to recreate that. So if you say, let's throw the reins off marijuana, the last thing we want to do is create another marijuana industry, because make no mistake about it, the corporate world will seize this as an opportunity to make money off it. And so you have to do this very thoughtfully and carefully. So I don't have an opinion on whether what we should do directly, whether we should be decriminalization versus illegal or making it legal. I think we have to think our way through this very carefully to ensure that we don't, as we come down from the legal side of the U-shaped curve to somewhere in the middle and find out what that is, we don't actually creep up the other side and create more harms than are necessary. We have to think our way through this. What are our legal options? What does the evidence tell us? We have to involve citizens in the discussion and the debate and the dialogue and be open to a whole range of different opinions. We eventually have to land somewhere and implement something, and then put the measures in place to robustly measure the outcomes. Have we actually achieved our goal on minimizing use and minimizing harms? And be prepared to adjust things over time to find what that bottom of the U is. But I think the most important thing is a debate like today. Because it's not acceptable for me, this is my opinion, it's not acceptable that we have an ideologically driven stance with no willingness to engage in a dialogue about what does the evidence actually tell us that we should be doing, and be open to thinking about doing things differently to ultimately create better outcomes for the people that in our communities. Thank you.
So next up, we'll ask Mr. John McLean, Superintendent of the Halifax Regional Police Department, to give his opinion on the legalization of cannabis.
Good afternoon. Police work very unpredictable. And I start that off by saying when I woke up this morning and I came to work, I had no idea I'd be standing down here having this discussion this afternoon. But I actually commend you for having this discussion because I think it's very valuable as a society that we partake in this debate. And I really don't know what you expect to hear from me as I stand up here and say, I think we got to arrest everybody, we got to do it. I'm not going to say that because I don't think that's the case. In fact, I'm struck by some of the words of Dr. Strang there. I think that's very important just about in everything we do, that we think our way through the problem. It's a lot easier said sometimes than done, but we need to think our way through the problem. I also want to say that as I stand here, I'm certainly no expert, either in the use of marijuana, or going back to my university days, or the fact of a law enforcement officer or a drug enforcement officer. What I do stand here is basically a beat cop from the north end of Halifax who, after 20 years of policing, has risen through the ranks and has some perspective on life in general, which I'll try to bring forward. From a police perspective, and it's not unlike much of what Dr. Strang talked about, we talk about harm reduction. From a police perspective, when we talk about drug policy, in which I include marijuana, is that police leaders, certainly our police leader and police in general, have called for a balanced approach when having this discussion, as I talk about, as we think our way through this problem. When I talk about a balanced approach, I talk about prevention, education, treatment, enforcement, and certainly appropriate alternative measures and discretionary activity when appropriate in circumstances. And that premise is based on certainly something that Dr. Strang said in terms of that there's no such thing as a harmless drug. There isn't. You know, people may come back, and I've said that before, and people say, well, alcohol is worse. To which I'll say, yeah, perhaps, but who cares? Should we be obligated to legalize one harmful drug because we've made some poor decisions about ones in the past? And that's a real decision. That's a real conversation to have. The question around crime, organized crime, and I can tell you right now that if miraculously marijuana were, if I could wave my wand right now, marijuana were to disappear, and we had never seen it before, and we've never seen it again, the reality is organized crime will still be there in some form as purveyors of some evil, of some way and somehow, and will still be necessary to do our jobs. I have no qualms about that whatsoever. I know that to be a reality. So, as I stand here and I say that, you know, currently certainly marijuana is in fact illegal. That is a fact. Certainly the manner in which we address it is from a police perspective, I think calls for some discretionary abilities. Mr. McKean was down there talking earlier, and we had discussion talking about mandatory minimum sentencing and all that other stuff. And to many degrees, I find that problematic because it takes a lot of discretion out of, in a police perspective or from a Crown perspective, in which we can deal with some of these situations. I think it's important to recognize that when we have this debate, we have to be courageous on both sides of the coin, I think. And also we were having a discussion about a recent project in the uptown area of Halifax that took people who were involved in the drug trade and rather than sending them to jail, which would have been the case normally, is to sit down with these individuals and devise a program whereby try to give them the skills and the abilities to get away from dealing with illegal drugs and doing all that. Not an easy thing to do. It was difficult, but the reality is, I think in certain situations, and this is new, and this is a very new situation. I think that we're starting to see that it works, but it takes courage, and it takes courage on all sides. Certainly from the person that's involved, certainly from the authorities, certainly from from defense lawyers who said that when he first got the letter, he had to come down himself to make sure that it was legit. And I mean, this is a reality. I'm the father of two daughters in high school. And I'm at the point now in my life where I finally find out more about life through my kids' eyes than I do through just about anything else that I do. And so when they talk about, the prevalence of drugs and all that other stuff within the schools and have the question, it's a concern for me when I hear her talk that people that will look down upon people that drink and drive with a stern face, but would have no issue to smoke marijuana and drive. That's a question we need to ask ourselves. And part of the situation around drink to drive, and so when you talk to some of my people from years ago, they'd say drink to drive was very prevalent. It still is to a certain degree today, but certainly more socially acceptable. And the reason that it's not is because that society as a whole is taking this on. And I think we need to be mindful of we talk about the harms that Dr. Strange talks about. We need to be mindful of the situation of that romanticizing certain drugs to the point of nostalgia, whereas, we have the reverse of what I would call reefer madness of years ago. People say you smoke marijuana and become mad. Well, I don't think that's the case. But I think we got to the point now where people get to the point where they think it has no effect whatsoever. And it's something to be mindful of. Certainly, and I will say that if we have $1 to spend in this area, around drug policy, it needs to be around treatment. It needs to be around prevention. That's where if I had $1 to spend, I wouldn't spend it on enforcement. I would spend it on treatment, and I would spend it on prevention, and I would spend it on education, because I think therein lies the true value in dealing with some of the things. The reality is, we're here to stay. I get that. And we will continue to work with the laws and work how the laws are presented themselves. And to a certain degree, this becomes a much bigger discussion. Certainly not a discussion that is the police own, but it's a much bigger, broader discussion, ultimately, that those that are in the highest levels of power will have to have, you know, some sort of movement on. But I mean, certainly, the reality is that I think we need to think our way through the problem, and we need to have considered debate. And I commend you for having this situation. Certainly, it was interesting to come here and have this discussion because I found I was talking about this a few hours ago. So it's not where one sits down and really, you know, tries to put together, you know, I think from a perspective of, well, what do I really think about this? And, you know, what does the law enforcement community think about when we have these discussions? And I certainly think that, you know, at the end of the day, you know, when we talk about enforcement, it is but one component of a much broader discussion, and certainly within that enforcement discussion, the ability for discretion, which I think is very important. No one wants to see a person with a gram of marijuana sitting in a prison. I certainly don't. You know, that's not what we're talking about here. But I mean, it's not quite as simple as that. I think it's a broader discussion, and it talks about discretion, it talks about the ability to apply the laws in both a fair and equitable manner. And that, again, will be the result of a much broader, deeper discussion as we all get together. I'll be happy to answer some of your questions afterwards. It was interesting having this discussion off the cuff, and look forward to hearing what the next presenters have to say.
Thank you very much. So I'll now ask Mr. Chris Enns, Vice President of the Halifax Compassion Club, to come up and speak.
Members of the panel, St. Mary's political science students, and guests of this conference, I want you to close your eyes with me and step back over 10 years ago to a trial that was happening before the Supreme Court of Canada, something called Parker versus Regina. An individual named Terry Parker had severe epilepsy. Terry Parker had seizures all day long, constantly. But he discovered when a friend helped him, when a friend who had absolutely no authorization to possess cannabis, when a friend who had absolutely no authorization to grow cannabis said to Terry, give this a try, it's going to make a huge difference. The very first time Terry Parker tried cannabis, he didn't have any seizures that day. And what Terry Parker noticed over the next number of months and the next number of years is that when he continued to use cannabis, he simply had no seizures whatsoever. Now, don't put me on a limb saying that cannabis cures all forms of epilepsy, that if you use cannabis and have epilepsy, you won't have seizures. But in Terry Parker's case, when he used cannabis, he didn't have seizures. And yet, when he put just a few plants in a closet in his house and tried to grow his own medicine so that he wouldn't have to go out to the black market, when he wouldn't have to go out to the guys on the street who were charging $10, $12, $15 a gram, when he wouldn't have to participate in this whole bureaucracy of cannabis legalization, he was charged. Officers burst down his door, came into his house, put him in cuffs, brought him to the station and said, what you are doing is not only morally wrong, but we're going to put you in jail for it, just like we have thousands of people before you. Well, Terry Parker stood up and says, no, you're not. And despite multiple struggles through the courts, when the Supreme Court of Canada had Terry Parker standing before it, the real issue was, would any reasonable human being in Terry Parker's case decide not to use cannabis and thus not be able to see, not be able to physically view the world that he lived in because he was having seizures throughout the day? Or would a reasonable human, despite the law, make the choice to break the law and medicate? And that's the question that I put forward to you today when we asked this debate about should cannabis be legal. And the hypothesis that I would put forward to you is that we should not be looking towards legalizing this substance. We should not be looking towards decriminalizing this substance, but we should be looking for an outright repeal of the prohibition that is causing all of them associated with this substance and toxic substances. I want to step back to the three categories regarding cannabis that we discussed that our opening statements looked at today. And, you know, I tried to open up with an angle regarding legal speaking. And over the past 10 years, we literally have over 10 decisions at the Supreme Court of Canada affirming the right of sick people to grow their own medicine, to find sources of this medicine so that they can produce the strains that work best for them, and the right of people to grow cannabis for those who are sick when they cannot do it for themselves. Probably one of the most affirming cases, despite a technical guilty conviction, is something called Barron versus Regina, an individual named Matt Barron, who was in British Columbia, and he himself was a very experienced grower, and yet he found there was a whole lot of problems with the current medical marijuana access regulations and that they were completely unconstitutional. So he decided to go out on a limb and said, you know what, I'm not going to be a part of the government's program, but I'm going to sign a piece of paper. I'm going to give my personal sworn commitment that every gram of cannabis that I grow is going to be sold to this compassion club called the British Columbia Compassion Club Society that had very strict regulations as to who the cannabis was dispensed through and made very sure that people had the medical conditions that they were claiming to have. Now, Matt Barron's garden of over 900 plants was discovered by the police, was raided, and subsequently he was charged significantly, charges that for most individuals would put them in jail for a serious amount of time. But Matt was successful in appeal all the way to the Supreme Court of Canada. And what the Supreme Court said on decision was, absolutely, there's a law still on the books, and we're not in a position right now to strike down that law. But what we will say, Matt, is that the benefit that you were providing to society as a whole far outweighed the harm that the law was meant to avoid. And thus the judge gave him an absolute discharge, which means he has no criminal record, no fine, absolutely nothing in the history books other than that trial to demonstrate what had happened. And we would look at a trial like that and move forward, legally speaking, and examine the mandatory minimums that have been implemented just this year with regard to cannabis laws. I think we really have a disconnect. Because had Matt Barron been facing the same judge today, the judge, had he found that guilty plea, would have had to say, I'm sorry, Matt, you're going to jail for over 3 years, and I have absolutely nothing that I can do about it. So let's set aside the legal issue for a minute. Let's just put it on the back burner, and let's think a minute about this great big economic benefit that legalized or decriminalized cannabis could offer our country. And I think if we even think separate from legalization or decriminalization and consider the whole new medical marijuana avenue that the government is proposing, we have an even bigger issue than the legal issue on our hands. Because right now, when a patient is sick and decides to grow their own medicine, the costs of production, in reality, are only between $1, maybe $3 a gram. You have the cost of electricity, the cost of organic nutrients, some lights, some pots, and I mean, we're off to the races. However, if you put in place regulations that require not only a cement wall, at least this thick for every grow room, security cameras that cover every last little microdot of a production site, CSIS security checks so that even an unconvicted individual, if there's any suspicion that they might be participating in diversion to the black market, even though there is no opportunity for them to go before a judge, even though there's no opportunity for fair trial, they are prevented from being able to grow for sick people. This is the program that the government is planning to put into effect next month, giving us 1 year left to grow medicine for ourselves, 1 year left to grow medicine for those people who are dear to us and in our lives and who desperately need it. And yet in a year, we're going to be called criminals if we grow for those friends and family. Now, when we talk economically, there's really only 2 economic sources that I can think about where the government could expect to really, make its big money off marijuana and off the sick. I think first we have traditionally the HST, a 15% sales tax that's applied to everything we buy in our province, except we don't apply HST to medicines. When you're prescribed to your doctor and you go in for whatever pharmaceutical it is, they never ask you for HST. Why would cannabis be different if it was a medicine? 2, if you're an incorporated company, any profits are charged at a 16% tax rate here in Canada. So if a company is sure marking up the cost of its production of cannabis to the people it is selling it to, absolutely that 16% income tax would apply. But across this country, we have thousands of groups, not-for-profit societies that have formed over the last 10 years for the sole goal of lobbying the government towards the changes that would allow them to grow cannabis for their patients on an economy of scale at a not-for-profit model. That would mean there is absolutely no 16% income tax available to the federal government. And thus you see a movement away from encouraging this model, guided under the province, guided under communities, and one rather that is guided only by the federal government and is restricted very seriously in terms of who can grow. Finally, the only third way of magic money making I can imagine for the government to profit off this substance is a new special tax. Something like tobacco, something like alcohol, and a handful of other things that we can see throughout our society where, because they were once under prohibition and we all feel this taboo, this uneasiness, we're more than willing as a society to accept this special tax when in reality we should be standing up and crying, this is our medicine. This is an argument of apples and oranges. We're not talking about a substance that we're looking to go out and get high. I'm not talking about a substance that we're looking to go out and have fun with. We're talking about a substance that is a medicine absolutely necessary to friends and family around us who are sick, some of whom are dying. So that takes us to the third point that was brought up in the opening regarding medicinal value of cannabis and where does that fall? That a suggestion was made that, we're really on the early avenues of cannabis research and we maybe don't know a whole lot and there's a lot more to know. And I would certainly agree with the final part of that conversation, final part of that statement where we say that we don't know everything yet. Absolutely. We're still discovering cannabinoids present in the plant. We're still discovering endocannabinoids present in our own body that interact with the same receptors as the plant cannabinoids coming from the plant. So are we at the beginning of the research? Absolutely. But do we have 40 years of peer-reviewed research sitting in our back pockets ready to pull out? Absolutely. And with that, I'd like to bring up a couple points to review points that were made by the previous speakers, with all due respect. The first and foremost is that there's some belief that cannabis in any way, shape, or form has carcinogenic properties, even if smoked. When I was in university and occasionally did try cannabis as a recreational substance, I certainly had that little bit of a guilt complex in the back of my mind that smoking anything must cause cancer and it's got tar, it's got carbon, this must be bad. But I was encouraged to go back to the literature, to go back to the very same peer-reviewed papers that supposedly this evidence for the carcinogenic nature of cannabis came from. And when I went looking for the evidence, I simply couldn't find it. But what I did find was a 30-year study by Dr. Donald Pashkin, a tenured professor at Harvard University, who was commissioned by the National Institute of Health to look at just that, how if you smoke more than 10 cannabis cigarettes per day, how would this affect your lungs over 10 years, 20 years, 30 years? And when he first started the study, he admits open-heartedly that I was expecting to find significant cancer results. I was expecting to find increased emphysema. I was expecting to find asthma that was out of control. But instead, Donald Pashkin continues the study and continues to report not a single increase in any lung condition that he has examined except for a temporary increase in bronchitis, which even if the person has been consuming cannabis at 10 cannabis joints per day over decades, if they stop smoking cannabis today, that temporary acute bronchitis will relieve itself. If the science tells us that cannabis doesn't cause cancer, then perhaps we ought to look at whether it helps with cancer. And this is where it gets really exciting and where a lot of people just simply haven't seen the research yet, including perhaps your own doctors. But since 1971, we had the first evidence that cannabis, when consumed orally and in high enough doses, directly results in apoptosis, that is cell suicide, of cancer cells while leaving the cells surrounding the tumor completely healthy. I thought this was absolute bullshit when someone first told me it. But when all the papers said the same thing, when we literally had papers looking at both test tubes and mice of every single human cancer cell line that they could pull together in the lab, and virtually every single experiment resulted in a dose-dependent cannabis-killing cancer manner, it seemed pretty clear that there was some strong evidence to back cannabis as an anti-cancer agent. And it was that point where I was at in university in my 4th year, just months away from graduation, still gung-ho about medical school. That had been the only option since grade 2. We were going to go to medical school and we were going to cure the world of all its problems. And when I had these papers in front of me and I brought them to my professors at Dalhousie University, I had never felt so much stigma in my whole life. I had worked hard for 4 years to keep my grades at a grade point average where I was qualified for medical school. I had worked on an honors thesis, worked in labs throughout my entire university time to try to build a good reputation with my professors. And yet they would not even open a dialogue as to why, after spending $100,000 on my education, specializing in immunology and microbiology, knowledge of our endocannabinoid system was purposefully left out of my education, despite the fact that universities across America teach it. Every organ system in our body, every cell in our body has a ratio of cannabinoid receptors that are interacting with cannabinoids that our own bodies make. And this is regulating everything from blood pressure to hunger to mood. I mean, you name a regulatory system in our body, and cannabinoids are playing a role. Now, when you become deficient in those cannabinoids, when your body doesn't have enough to keep that regulation going, we can supplement with outside cannabinoids, what we call phytocannabinoids, the cannabis plant being the main plant, which these are present in. So, if someone has a genetic predisposition where their body isn't producing the same amount of cannabinoids as your average person, or maybe it's not a genetic predisposition, maybe it's an environmental thing, and after 50 or 60 years of being barraged by carcinogenic substances throughout their life, the cancers in their body can simply no longer be regulated by the concentration of endocannabinoids present in their blood. And so, when that person supplements with phytocannabinoids from an outside source, like the cannabis plant, what we see is not only a stop and reduction in the speed and growth of cancer, but we see an outright reversal. And when I heard people claiming this, when I anecdotally had people beside me, elderly people, 50, 60, 70, who were telling me that I once had a terminal diagnosis, and I met this person and they gave me a large amount of cannabis extract. I consumed it regularly and in high doses over a couple of months, and I'm proud to tell you I'm standing here today without cancer. I thought they were bullshitting me. And so I figured the only way to prove this to myself was to go out and find people with cancer, to find people with terminal diagnosis, and to offer them treatment. Otherwise, I'd be in the dark. And so it was at that time that I dropped out of university. At the same time, met my fiancée, Sherry Reed, who's sitting in the audience, and we formed the Halifax Compassionate Club. And the primary goal of the Halifax Compassionate Club, well, over the years we've expanded our services to everything from glow classes to a dispensary that we operate. The primary goal has always been to facilitate free access to cannabinoid medicines for those who are suffering from cancer, especially terminal diagnosis. And over the past 5 years of my work in this field, I don't want to brag, I don't want to put a number to it, because that's not what I'm here for. But I could bawl before you about the number of people that have come back and said, my cancer is shrinking, or my cancer is gone. Now, I've watched lots of people die too. We've had individuals who have tried the treatment, who have given it their best focus. It was too little or too late, or maybe it just wasn't the right treatment option for them. I'm not saying in every single circumstance, if you have cancer, cannabis is going to cure you. And I'm not trying to put cannabis out there as a cure-all. But what I am trying to do is try to stop some of the myths associated with the side effects surrounding cannabis and really try to highlight this incredible anti-potent, anti-tumoral activity of cannabis. Because if that science is going to solidify itself and move forward, I really don't think at the end of the day we have any justification for prohibition. Otherwise, we're looking at genocide. Just regarding cannabis and driving, I want to make a quote from the Senate Special Committee on Illicit Drugs in 2002. This report has summarized available research on cannabis and driving. Evidence of impairment from the consumption of cannabis has been reported by studies using laboratory tests, driving simulators, and on-road observation. Both simulation and road trials generally find the driving behavior shortly after consumption of large doses of cannabis results in 1, more cautious driving style, 2, increased variability in lane position, 3, longer decision times. Whereas these results indicate a change from normal conditions, they do not necessarily reflect impairment in terms of performance effectiveness, since few studies report increased accidental risk. This is directly coming from a summary of all peer-reviewed research as looked at by the Senate Special Committee on Illegal Drugs in 2002. Thank you.
So our final guest panelist tonight will be.
Just don't mean to correct my accent. My last name's McKean, but I don't think that's important. Just a couple of things. I wanted to basically talk. I'm a legal aid lawyer, and I've been practicing criminal law probably for the last 10 to 12 years. Just wanted to deal with a couple of things that are sort of out there as to how the marijuana laws operate or don't operate. So a lot, I don't know whether many of you have heard, there's a lot of urban myths out there regarding marijuana and marijuana possession. A lot of people think that there's some sort of Superintendent McLean maybe has heard this as well. There's these myths that having this, like, you have only one joint on you, you'll never get charged. Well, that's not true. You can be charged with half a joint being found in your pocket. I've seen that happen. Something that people forget as well is if you're out, I haven't seen this happen, but it's certainly under the textbooks or under the law, something that could happen. If someone was out smoking a joint and they passed a joint to somebody else, you could be charged with trafficking in the way the law is written. So that's the thing. It's not like friends giving a joint to a friend. Nobody has to, as a favor, as a birthday present maybe. Money doesn't have to go. Money doesn't have to exchange hands for you to be convicted of trafficking. And that's with any kind of the drugs. It's not just a marijuana thing. So it's something that people need to be aware of, because obviously possession is one thing, but literally giving your friend a joint is something that can lead to be a trafficking charge. Now, I'm not going to give any sort of opinion on what I have. I think you guys, when you hear what I'm saying, you'll have an idea as to where I'm coming from on this. But when I want to look at marijuana, I also want to look at it in comparison to alcohol. Now, I do basically, I'm in the kind of practice I do. I'm in court nearly every day. I spend a lot of time in my practice, not as much recently, but in the past, being a sales lawyer. And the sales lawyer is basically, for lack of a better word, the bottom of the barrel of the criminal justice system, dealing with the people that who have basically been arrested by the police, and the police don't want to release. And you deal with them and trying to get them out on bail. Frankly, if you do it for a while, you get to know the people, and you get to know what's going on. There's regulars, so to speak. And these are people that don't have any lawyers, and they need to try and get out on bail. I've probably dealt with over 1,000, maybe even 2,000 to 3,000 people in the course of the time. And a couple things I can say. There's 2,000 or 3,000 people that I've probably dealt with in my career in sales. Not once, and have I seen somebody who was in court, who was in cells, because they got high and beat somebody up. Never seen that. I've never seen that at all. I see domestics. Domestics are a big part of it, whether it's male, female, female, male, 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 female, female. Big part of it, where people get in domestic fights or domestic situations. And I'd say, and this is just ballpark, but I'd say 80 to 90% of those cases there's an alcohol component on it. It's clearly an alcohol component in there. And that's what's fueled the domestic thing. But again, never have I seen it where I was reading the record, where I was reading what was going on, that someone had smoked a joint and then they got in a fight. Never happened. And Frank, I'm not trying to study anybody's experience, but I think everybody knows how the two different drugs operate, and it's reflected in the criminal justice system, with the fact that in how the ramifications. Frankly, a person smokes a joint, and they get a case of the munchies, watch some video games, but they're not going out and beating up their spouse. That's just the way it works from the criminal justice system. People who smoke joints do not go out and kill people. That happens with alcohol. I've been involved in cases where the murder or would not have happened if there was no alcohol involved. It's a fact. I've never seen any kind of serious violence because of marijuana. Now, I've never seen the police arrest somebody for being disorderly because they were high. Never seen that. Alcohol is all the time. Now, one thing, I may disagree with some of it. Marijuana a gateway drug? Sure it is. Sure it is. Just like cigarettes, just like alcohol. A fatal drug that I see, which is a legally prescribed drug that ruins lives constantly, OxyContin. I see people that, frankly, it's the only drug they ever took was OxyContin because it was prescribed to them. And then they get addicted to it and their lives are ruined. See that as a very common thing. And it's part of the, just part of the, and that's a legally prescribed drug that certainly has benefits to it for people that are suffering from pain. But again, it's legal, just like cigarettes and just like alcohol. Never once have I seen somebody shaking, shivering, screaming for a doctor because they're going through marijuana withdrawal themselves. Not once. Never once have seen that. I've seen people that could not talk because they're going through alcohol withdrawal themselves. They're shivering, they're shaking, they're losing control of their bodily functions. It happens constantly. It is a part of the process. I have yet to see somebody steal to support the marijuana habit. I see people steal to support drug habits constantly, not just, especially when it comes to crack cocaine, especially when it comes to OxyContin, things like that. Absolutely. I've never seen someone who's, it's just like a lot of the crime that's going on is petty theft crime, as Superintendent McLean would do, and the main root of it is people are supporting their addictions. Alcohol is one of those addictions, and that's often when people are stealing because they're stealing from, frankly, they're still stealing the mouthwash from the shoppers in order to get the alcohol content out of that, or they're rubbing alcohol to get the alcohol content out of that, but they're not stealing because they need to get high. They're stealing, or else they're stealing to sell the items to buy crack. They're not doing it. They're not doing it for marijuana, and it's just the way. From a person who's been practicing criminal law for 10 years, the way I've seen it now, and I think Superintendent McLean was totally correct. There is an organized crime element that would always be there, regardless, no matter what was in there, and there is certainly, and I suggest, a criminal element involved in marijuana itself. No doubt about it. I suggest too, that it's not as big as it is regarding crack cocaine, which is a dangerous drug, which is complete blight on society. And the people involved in that are, frankly, horrific people, and there's really nobody that's involved in the selling of crack cocaine that has any other purpose but ruining people's lives. People who are selling marijuana is a lot different. It is not as controlled. There are people like the person from the Compassion Club who are selling marijuana to help people. That's clearly part of it. And I see that happen. But I realize too, there's organized crime involved in selling cigarettes. Cigarettes, which are legal drug. So these are all the things I want these are all the things that I've experienced. Now, there's two ways of looking at it. And I'm not asking you to do it, but there's almost this is something that's been going on in society for ages. This is not a new problem. This is, as was alluded to in the opening, this is part of an ongoing debate. What I would suggest, and as a topic of discussion, alcohol is banned. Marijuana isn't. Wouldn't it be the consistency, I would suggest, just as a talking point, either have both of them banned or have them both of them legal. That would be a consistent statement, because that would probably make some sense. Because I see it from the criminal justice perspective, and I went to university, of course, and I like beer as much as anybody, but it causes a hell of a lot more problems for people, marijuana, from a criminal justice perspective, and it does. That's a fact. But 10 years experience as a criminal defense lawyer will tell you that it is a serious problem, and it is something that is. I think when we're looking at it from that perspective, certainly marijuana does seem to do pretty well. Notwithstanding the fact that I do think marijuana probably has some health effects and does have some problems, but it is clearly, I suggest that alcohol and marijuana may come out of it. That's my comments.
Wow, all right. So you guys saw a few different sides of the battlefield there. And basically, you know, it's that's what we're here to do. It's we're here to inform you guys, and you know, like these are all public officials for the most part. You know, people are definitely informed and involved with this debate, and it's something that we want to we want to unleash you guys on these four here. But we want to keep it civil at the same time. So please, if you guys have any questions, shall we break into question period? And
Absolutely. So we'll break into question period. We ask that you ask a question to one specific panelist. If there's more than one panelist that wants to answer, absolutely, there's no problem there. But let's open the floor. Does anyone have any questions? No? Yes? Sorry, yes, go ahead.
I've got a question for Chris. We were talking a lot about the medical use of marijuana, and I agree with almost everything you were saying. But I think we can't really suggest that marijuana is only used as a medicine. It's of course used recreationally as well. I was wondering if you could speak to that a little bit.
Sure. I think you have to be really careful about the line that you draw between what's recreation and what's medicine. Oftentimes, if you go to the doctor and you're suffering from depression, you're suffering from anxiety, before they try to put a pharmaceutical before you, before they try to prescribe something that might have some negative side effects, they suggest things that might increase your general happiness level, that might increase your general feelings of well-being. And what we tend to see among people who do smoke cannabis, and even often in their own mindset see it as something that's recreational, they no doubt admit that after I smoke that joint, I feel happier, I feel healthier, and I feel hungrier. And all three of those things can be, extremely medicinally valuable. And above and beyond that, I think especially when we look at the science demonstrating that those who have an elevated level of cannabinoids in their blood, especially it's demonstrated in a study just published 2 years ago where they looked at head and neck tumors in those who were cannabis smokers, and what they found is that those who smoke cannabis regularly all day actually have a lower rate of head and neck cancers than those who smoke nothing at all. And if anybody would like a copy of that study, I'd be happy to email it to you if you share your email with me at the end of the session.
Okay. Did anyone else have a question? Yep.
Hey, Mike Longlet from the St. Mary's University Journal. This is a question for Dr. Strang. Overall, let's just assume that we're talking about removing marijuana from Schedule II, the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act, and we're just taking it out altogether. Would, in your opinion, the cost of assuming that risk, the additional cost of that risk to public health, outweigh the total cost of enforcement as we know it now within Canada, although admitting that you might be fuzzy on the numbers?
I wouldn't even speculate on that. But no, I will say, we spend a huge amount of money now, as the last speaker said, in the criminal justice system dealing with this because it's an illegal substance. But clearly a regulatory approach would involve would involve cost to it, but also with that regulation you have control of pricing and taxation. So the money is not going to the black market, the money is actually going into government, which can then be used to run the regulatory system, as well as, like we do with alcohol and tobacco, we use those revenues to help fund a whole range of other government work, for everything from roads to hospitals to whatever. That's what I'll say. I mean, I think it's one of the things that we need to think our way carefully through that, and part of it would be what's the actually economic analysis that you would do. But economics is only one piece of it.
Riley, come forward a bit though.
For Superintendent McLean, or McClellan, I'm sorry, I can't remember your last name.
You're right first.
McLean.
McLean, okay. Obviously, all police officers are human beings. They have their own individual perspectives and beliefs. But as the superintendent, I'm sure you have an idea of what the common discourses are amongst this talk among police officers. I'm just curious what more or less the general idea is amongst police officers about this topic.
I would say you would be incorrect to assume that I would know what the general courses of 600 or 700 or thousands of police officers in terms of what this discourse is. Certainly, yes, people do have individual ideas that, from my experience, run the gamut as you go across. I can tell you personally, I know of no consensus belief one way or the other. There, you know, that speaks to that. And I'm not being insincere when I say that. I'm about as sincere as I can possibly be, is that I can speak to no general consensus one way or the other. I know at the end of the day, you know, officers are afforded a level of discretion to deal, and should be, and must be, in order to you know, put forward their duties. There's no doubt about that. We would be in a very dire place if officers weren't given appropriate discretion in appropriate circumstances. But having said that, I can't answer your question in a sense that would be either honest or accurate.
Yes.
I have a question for the superintendent. Obviously, you're aware that there's many patients in Nova Scotia. In fact, we have the highest number of patients with cannabis licenses per capita. So you're aware of these licenses. What did the Halifax Regional Police do to get informed about licenses in cannabis, or cannabis licenses, sorry, in Canada? Because it's been my experience that officers don't know what a cannabis license looks like. They don't know what to look for in a license. They have no idea what the regulations say or don't say. And if this is something that you're enforcing, has there ever been any kind of program in the Halifax Regional Police that has ever educated the officers? Because I haven't met any of those yet.
I know certainly those who deal with drug enforcement are well versed in the issues of cannabis licenses.
So what percentage would that be of your department?
People that are involved in the drug enforcement?
Right.
I mean, that's a relatively small section that would deal with.
And how many are DRE officers?
We'll try to keep it to
one question.
Sorry.
How many DRE officers do we have?
Right.
I really can't tell you. I don't. DRE, for those who don't know, are drug recognition experts that are trained specifically to look for.
Isn't there 6? Isn't there?
I really don't know. I have no idea. That are trained to look for drug signs with an impairment driving. That sort of thing. It's specific specialized training that would take the place, say, of a breathalyzer or something else that works in that.
Yes.
In your experience, the question is directed to whom? The superintendent, I'm sorry. In your experience, has anybody been convicted for driving under the influence of marijuana in Nova Scotia? It's a two-part question. That's why you allowed.
Convicted? I know people have been charged with driving under DRE for driving while impaired.
For marijuana?
For drugs. I don't know if it specifies marijuana. I don't know if there's no test per se for marijuana.
Okay. The second question is, do they issue these same citations for people that drive under oxycontin?
The driving is for impairment. Drug recognition experts is for impairment, not particular impairment by a specific drug.
Megan, did you have a question?
My question was for, I'm sorry, I don't remember, Dr. Robert Strider?
Strider.
My question was about when we talk about prescription drugs. I mean, I've read or heard of doctors in the United States who were given incentives for prescribing things such as Oxycontin. And how, from your experience, has this influenced, or if it does in any way, the Canadian Doctors Association on how they prescribe drugs that could potentially be addictive?
I think there is a fair bit of evidence that the pharmaceutical industry can have a considerable influence on prescribing habits of physicians. There has been significant progress made in Canada and the U.S. to, if you look back compared to 20, 30 years ago, to what the drug industry, pharmaceutical industry is allowed to do now in terms of gifts, dinners, a whole range of things. Is it still an issue? Absolutely. It's an issue in prescribing. It's certainly an issue in research and what evidence we actually have available around the risks and benefits of a whole range of drugs. So, but I think we have to be evidence-based, and so, and I'll just make a comment. I think if we're going to go down the road of marijuana as a medicinal, let's treat it like a pharmaceutical. Let's start to do the research, and maybe it's not. Maybe what are the components that you can actually maybe deliver in another way? But let's do the solid, hard research like we would require on other pharmaceuticals for their license.
Okay. O'Dane had a question.
This is for Chris Enns. When you were discussing earlier, you were speaking about tax policy, and I can understand when you speak and say that, you know, medicine isn't taxed and co-ops aren't taxed if they're a nonprofit. But if we were to go down the road of legalization and it was to be open for recreational use, would you be up for taxing that as a whole, recreational use, and then have medicinal use that tax exempt?
I think it's important to treat cannabis like any other food substance that is naturally grown and unprocessed. And when you go to the superstore or you go to the Sobeys and you buy your lettuce or you buy your tomatoes or you buy things that are grown by a farmer and put on the shelf, in no circumstance in Canada are those things fall under HST legislation. And so I don't see why cannabis would fall under the same legislation.
Vegetable.
Okay.
Yes. This is directed towards Mr. Strang, Mr. McLean, and Mr. McKean. My name is Bob Dillman. I'm a member of Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. I just want to say that the amount of information that I've heard here coming from you gentlemen is shockingly misinformed.
Yes. Yeah.
I'm a patient.
We ask that you remain respectful.
Entitled to their own opinion, and so we don't want to criticize, but please build upon, you know, what was already.
Okay, the reason why I say this is because I have environmental illness. I cannot take any pharmaceuticals whatsoever. Okay? They have almost killed me on more than one occasion because I followed what my doctor was mandated to do and say to me. Okay? They haven't got that right because I've got informed consent, okay? So why is it that you can profit from me being sick, you can profit from me being sick, and you can profit from me going to jail, but I can't grow a plant that hasn't harmed a single human being from its use in 5,000 recorded medical years? 5,000 years it's been recorded. Not one single person has ever died from using cannabis. But yet, my family doctor can come in and write me a prescription for OxyContin like that. And I have to wait 8 to 10 weeks to get a license. That's only good. Why is it that you guys are allowed to violate my human rights and jeopardize my life?
We'll ask if one of the three would like to respond. Just one.
I can just respond. I'm a criminal defense lawyer. It's really good. I actually fight to try and keep people out of jail. I fight to try and keep people from having their rights infringed. So I just don't get your comments about how somehow I'm blocking.
You get paid, don't you?
Get paid regardless.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll move on. Actually, I have a question. If I may jump in, quite interested. Yeah, Mr. McKean, you said that you're very familiar with the laws and that you've gone over the analysis of, you know, marijuana and alcohol and the pros and cons, the dichotomy there. What is your prediction if marijuana was to legalize? Do you see a same pattern of behavior, or do you expect a different course of behavior that, you know, maybe it might be more erratic or, you know, more pronounced than what we see now?
You know what? Honestly, I'm not a predictor as to what happened, but I know one thing would save people getting criminal records for like smoking marijuana, because it does happen. Often, I can tell you, a person who gets often, as I alluded to, a person who gets caught for the first time with a small amount of marijuana, but there's no hard and fast, but often those people will be sent to diversion. And what would happen is that means the charge will be dropped. The person who gets caught with marijuana a second time, not so easy. Looking for a criminal record. Having a criminal record that, frankly, was alluded to, can be a real problem for the rest of your lives, especially when you're traveling to the States, because a small possession of marijuana can really make it difficult for people when they go across the border. So I can't predict how it happened, but it would certainly take some of the burden off the criminal justice system, and it would take a lot of people that otherwise would not have a criminal record, would not have to worry about having a criminal record, which would save, frankly, I think society, would make people productive, prevent them from, wouldn't be an obstacle for them getting employment, and wouldn't be an obstacle for them traveling, and it would frankly free up resources to be dealt with, frankly, more serious bills that are actually cause real blight to society.
Dr. Strang, you wanted to?
Yeah, I can make a prediction, or not a prediction with certainty, but I can say with almost certainty that if we legalize marijuana and don't have very tight government controls over the sale and distribution, you will have big corporations move in, and we will have, not immediately, but over time, exactly the same situation we have with alcohol and tobacco, and then we'll be fighting a rearguard action trying to roll that back. So that's why I say it needs to be done very thoughtfully and carefully. Marijuana does hurt people. I think we need to separate the issue around the broad population and what we do that and the legalities around that, separate from how do we deal with the evolving field of the medicinal properties of whatever it is within a marijuana plant that actually has the pharmaceutical effects. And deal with that, as I said, through like we would with anything else. We don't no longer sell willow bark in stores. We sell aspirin. So we've evolved that way. We actually were able to find out what it is, the substance in willow bark that actually has the pharmaceutical properties, and we now have. So I think we need to separate the two. So that's why I come back to my point that we do need to do this thoughtfully and carefully, because if we just open the doors, there's still, you've replaced an illegal profit motive with now a legal profit motive, and you create a whole other set of harms.
Okay, I have 6 questions going. We'll go by order this way. The gentleman at the end over there. Yes.
Dr. Strang, how can you expect us to believe that you're concerned about corporations profiting off of marijuana when you're not concerned, or don't seem to be concerned, about organized crime profiting off of marijuana?
My very first outset, I said, the current approach, solely a war on drugs, is wrong, and it's creating huge harms. But you don't replace an illegal profit-driven organization with a legal profit-driven organization. You have to have something in the balance where the primary purpose, and this is government oversight, is to actually maximize the benefits, minimize the harm.
Yes, you do. It's a
public health approach, and that requires strong government oversight. Like tobacco,
Just one question each, because I see about 10 hands that have just been raised. If you want to
I just want to really commend Dr. Strang for his comments there, because a lot of people aren't aware of what's happening with the medical marijuana regulations. And next month, the federal government has announced that they're going to be transitioning the program to doing just what Dr. Strang is afraid of, that they're handing over the production of marijuana to a handful of really mega corporations in our country. And the very cost-benefit impact analysis that Health Canada provides on those new regulations is that it will cost the average person $2.1 million to meet the qualifications to grow. And so we've literally already announced formally we're going to do just that. We're going to hand it over to the big corporations, and we're going to collect the big ones.
Okay, so the man in the back over there in the green coat, put his hand up. Yep.
I have a question for the superintendent. It's more of a policy question. Two American states just legalized marijuana, so I was looking at the news, and a lot of officers were saying that when you legalize marijuana, that's not a crime anymore, so we can focus on our energy and resources on other crimes. Do you think that would be the case if we legalize marijuana in Nova Scotia? People would the officers would take their focus on that, and they could divert those resources and all those workforce in terms of solving other crimes?
Oh, certainly in terms of you take place on it. Again, but I don't want to give the impression that all of a sudden, because I think it's an erroneous perception.
No, it's just a question.
Yeah, no. I think that it's, no, I'll answer this. I think it's an erroneous perception to think that, like I said earlier, that we took away marijuana or made it totally legal today, that all of a sudden that there would be this great influx of resources to go do other things. I mean, to a certain degree, there may be some validity to that, when you talk about specific investigations or all that, what have you. But there, like I said, there will still be things that will fill the void in terms of having to be investigated by those who are involved in, who who basically life's purpose is to involve themselves in illegal activities for the sake of profit or what have you. And so I can't quantify to say all of a sudden that now marijuana becomes legal, all of a sudden now we have 30% more time to go do something else. It would be a very difficult, it'd be a very difficult thing to sort of quantify.
Okay, so question?
Well, we've been talking a lot about the actual effects of marijuana use and, it's among the population, but I'd kind of like to just concentrate on where we're sitting right now in terms of guilty offense verdicts and all that, and especially focusing on the expertise of Mr. McKean, whose perspective I thought was really good in terms of the actual legal aid side, which is something we don't hear very often from the cells directly, and also from Superintendent McLean. In terms of guilty drug offense verdicts proportionally by population compared to the rest of Canada, we're sitting at about 153% of guilty offense verdicts. That's all of them lumped in together. So whether it's actual conviction into custody or just a fine, that lumps them together. But as it stands right now, it's relatively high compared to the rest of the population. I'm wondering, is that, and this is in 2011 for the most recent numbers is this because of increased focus on a policing side, or maybe increased focus or effectiveness on a prosecution side, or is it simply because there is actually a larger use of drugs within Nova Scotia that has been observed by law enforcement officials?
Yes.
Yes.
But yes, but when I say that, I'm not trying to be, there's probably a lot of those things that come into play. In terms of, to answer that question, I think that some of there's probably some truth in all those components of which you spoke. Your perspective, maybe.
Yeah. Well, the one thing I'd say just regarding the high sort of high the conviction rates and stuff. The one thing which was alluded to, I mean, first time offenders. I want to put a caveat. A first time person caught with marijuana who's not in the car, who's not smoking doobies around in a schoolyard or doing something like that. He's probably, a police officer may even do it. A police officer may not charge them. So, and Superintendent McLean alluded to this. They don't always charge. They catch people with marijuana, and frankly, I've seen many of the files where, yes, a person was found with a little bit of marijuana, they didn't even bother charging them. And so there is police officer discretion. But again, there's a Crown discretion where the Crown might decide to put the matter in. A lot of it starts coming up, though, too, and frankly, this is something that happens, is because the matter when it comes to a marijuana, it's penalty is so low that a person doesn't necessarily, you know what I mean? It becomes something that's not litigated when it's just physical possession as much as say maybe if it's property for the purpose, because the stakes aren't as high, and there are a variety of courses through the system where people are given breaks before it even comes to the court, and by the time if a person is before the court, maybe some of those breaks have already been given to them, and that's something that's coming into play. But the one thing which actually, backtracking, but I would agree with Superintendent McLean totally on that, is marijuana is not something people should be driving a car on. Someone's been smoking marijuana, and it's clearly something that the police, I think, someone's driving in a car and they have marijuana on them. There's a good chance that's not going to go to diversion. There's a good chance that person is going to be charged with simple possession. But that is something that I think, it is something that is a problem. And frankly, I actually haven't had a case where I've actually gone to trial where I actually had a person with a charge under marijuana, but it is common. It's fairly complicated. There's new prosecutors that are solely geared towards prosecuting people that are impaired besides something other than alcohol.
To go back to your question, your statistics, when you talking about drugs in total?
Yeah, it lumps in drug use in total, so I mean, marijuana is completely
right? I mean, there's a big difference between marijuana and crack.
And that's, the reality is that, Halifax has suffered some serious drug issues. I'm not talking marijuana, I'm talking some serious drug issues of other, let me say, more harmful drugs that have certainly elicited a lot of attention from an enforcement perspective, and should have.
Okay, so I see 4 other hands up, so we'll go gentleman in the khaki. One question.
Yes, Mr. McLean. I would like to have your answer to my previous question. Me being a sick patient, cannabis being my only option, whether or not I can have a doctor sign it for $250 when I can't afford it, if I use that cannabis and I have a doctor who says, oh yes, he needs it, what right does a police officer have to come into my home and take my plants?
Are you saying
When it's my only option to either suffer in bed and waste away, or to actually be functional as a human being, what right?
Okay, just one question and just a
Well,
short question.
that is the question. What right does he have to come in and arrest me?
The right I have as a police officer is enshrined within the criminal code or within the Charter of Rights of Canada. That's where my rights come from.
But it violates my human
Please
rights.
let him answer.
If
Please
the
let him
question
answer.
is, you disagree with the law, that's fine. I get that. But when you talk about specifically where do the rights come from, that's where the rights come from. And the process of medicinal marijuana and the process by which that can be obtained is, again, you may disagree with it, but that it is what it is. But to sit here and say, to me, where does my right come from? My right comes from the law of the land.
Perfect.
That's where my right comes from.
Last question. Next. Then we'll open the floor.
Yes, yes.
My name's John Percy. Great panel, by the way. I notice that there's some people that should be on this panel that are not here. A lot of the people on the panel here are dealing with the reactive measures of the current legislation. And I think as a political science group, it would behoove you to have the same discussion again with members of the 4 registered political parties in this country.
Well, we tried to get some political parties out. And we'll come back to us on that one. So your question is for which panelist? There's one
Okay,
question.
well, my question was actually for your group.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, no, why don't you again do the same thing again and have members from the 4
It really, it's a matter of it's a matter of accountability. I believe personally as to why elected representatives, or at least representatives of parties, political parties, who would run an election, I think it's it's a matter of them not wanting to get their hands dirty. They would not sit. You will not have, unless it is huge media event, huge full on, like, everything involved. I do not believe that you'll have a member from each political party sit down and have a panel and debate it in front of a crowd like this. Not unless it was like some immense breakthrough, and we were ready to take this to the next step on a federal level.
Considering they all have written policies on.
Oh yeah, they all do. They all do. They wouldn't do it with us though. We've asked for
It's an outright act of cowardice.
O'Dane, did you want to say something?
This was actually just for the superintendent. Now, we actually, oddly enough, we probably have a similar perspective on this. I've been working in bars for about 7 years, so I've seen the regulative force that's needed when it comes to alcohol, i.e. why it's very easy for a 6'6" guy to get a job, is because, well, needless to say, when people get drunk, they need to be persuaded out of the establishment. Now, I can understand when you speak of enforcement, because in the same way that it is legal for people above the age of 19 to drink, it should be legal, in my perspective, legal for people over the age of 19 to smoke marijuana. And once again, it should not, no 15-year-old should be going to high school hot. I can agree with the need for enforcement. But when you speak of enforcement, would you agree that given the nature of marijuana and given the nature of the effects of marijuana on the population, that legalization along the same lines of alcohol would be appropriate?
Who was your question directed to?
Again, I'll mirror back to something I said earlier in terms of, and I think Dr. Strange spoke to it. We've done some things wrong with alcohol. I think you agree with that. We've done some things wrong. And alcohol is certainly a significant problem. To work downtown, you've seen it. I used to work downtown, so alcohol is a significant problem. And it's but it's come to the point where, to a certain degree, it's become socially acceptable that, especially in our culture in terms of, hey, you don't get drunk and be an ass, and everyone is just, yeah, that's fine, that's just the way it is, right? I don't necessarily think that the answer to that is then to turn around and say, well, let's just legalize marijuana because alcohol is bad too. I don't think that's the answer. To suggest that, to say that people don't get rowdy I really don't know. I can't say from a psychological one. I'm sure there are people downtown that are both high and drunk at the same time causing problems. I guarantee you that. But the reality is, I can't say that simply that then a legalization of cannabis would then just be, would solve any problem.
Okay, well,
Can I be allowed one follow-up?
no. I'm going to do one last question. It was for the gentleman in the back who had not yet asked a question.
I live in Vancouver for 2.5 years, and I know for a fact that because it's a cultural thing and everyone does it and downtown is normal, the police kind of gave up on it, Like I used to smoke weed like in front of the SkyTrain, and it was fine, and you could buy downtown and everything because I believe that the police noticed that it was worth it, like it was worthless. There was nothing they could do about it, and they let it happen. So I'd like to know that, to McKean and to Superintendent McLean, do you see that, like, because the legislative and the executive couldn't make a decision, so the police was like, I don't want to put my hands on this problem, and we're going to let it go. They made their own decision, Although the law didn't make anything, but they said, this is too big for us to handle, so let it happen. Do you see that happening here?
I didn't quite get the first question. You said SkyTrain, so you must be talking about...
Yeah, in BC, Vancouver. Yeah, in BC, so in BC and in Vancouver, the police really, they don't care that much. So I'd like to know that, do you see that something that it could happen in other places of Canada? I understand in BC the reasons because of the economic point of view of the weed that's usually there, so the police doesn't handle that much that thing, but do you see that happening in other provinces too, as the police just, we should wait until they decide and we're not going to handle this for now?
A couple things. One, BC is usually a little more liberal than the rest of us to begin with, for most cases. Secondly, you'll see in many things, and what you said earlier, Ben, about you can't get 4 politicians to come to this discussion. You'll see in many things where the police, from my experience, often become arbiters of things that people don't want to get into. Mental health is one of them. The reality is, again, it comes back to certainly there is discretion within officers in certain capacity, and there has to be discretion. In fact, one of the signs of a true profession is that one, as a professional, that they have some discretion in the manner in which they carry out their duties. Having said that, will we get to the point where everyone just turns a blind eye? I don't know. Who's to say that things have probably changed more in the last few years than they have before? But again, discretion is an interesting thing because you can't regulate discretion by its very nature. And so, so in terms of what's discretionary to me may not be discretionary to this person here. But in terms of, at the end of the day, we're still beholden to the legislature and the acts which we are sworn to. But again, certainly, I can tell you that the CACP, as the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police, have long advocated for an alternative method of dealing with these low possession type of offenses and dealing with them in a manner which will not give your client, a criminal record and all that other stuff. But again, those will be legislature decisions at some particular point, one way or the other.
Perfect. So we'd like to thank Mr. McKean, Mr. Enns, Mr. McLean, and Dr. Robert Strang to come out to the panel tonight.